Okay. All right, guys. Podcast time. Just making sure I can get this all set. There we go. All right. Yeah. Podcast time. We're going to talk today about results versus hours put in. Now, before we get into the show, as always, the goal of this show is to help athletes build their dream careers in sport, helping athletes reach their true potential. So if you know a young up and coming athlete that is looking to grow and hit new levels in their career, if you share this show with them, the show is called The Elite Development Podcast. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. Also, if you are an athlete listening to this, on what day of the week is it? On Sunday, August 13th, I am going to be running a masterclass on optimizing your training week. So as you see this, if you are interested in a masterclass to learn how to optimize your training week, how to build your training schedule around work, around life, all of those things, get the most results in the least amount of time, we're going to be running this masterclass on Sunday, August 13th at 10 a.m. MST. Comment on the video below saying I'm in, and I will get you the details on how we can sign you up. All right, let's get into the podcast. We're going to be talking about results versus hours put in, and we're going to start in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponent and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are talking about results versus hours put in. Now, the reason this is so important, first of all, if you're seeing this live, if you're seeing this before the weekend, I'm going to be running a masterclass Sunday, August 13th, talking about exactly how to get a better handle on this, talking about exactly how you can optimize your training week and how you can make sure you're getting better results from the training that you're doing. If you are interested in that masterclass, make sure that you're reaching out. It's going to be August 13th, Sunday morning at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Now, let's get into it. So talking about results versus hours put in. The reason I wanted to bring this to you guys is because especially since I've narrowed my focus down to combat sports athletes over the last few years, something that I see very, very present is athletes that just get obsessed with work. And don't get me wrong, to a degree, that is a very good thing. But there's a point of diminishing returns, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How much obsession with the work is good and how much is actually hurting you more than it's helping you. Now, where I see this the most is athletes that basically just throw extra training into their week with no thought whatsoever of what they're actually working on, or athletes that don't take recovery days because they don't feel like they need them. Now, first off, the analogy with the recovery days that I always like to use is imagine you're on a road trip. So the reasoning that I hear a lot of athletes say is, I don't feel like I need it, and I feel like I'm taking away from my progress by not training that extra day and just sitting around and not doing anything. Now, think about it like this. If you're on a road trip, when you stop for gas to refuel your car, are you taking away from the road trip by stopping for gas, or are you ensuring that the road trip can continue? Right? Because right now, you might not feel like you need a recovery day because you're like, yeah, I trained 6 days and then I just feel fine, so I want to train a 7th. And then you might keep doing that for a few weeks, a few months, even years. But then what starts to happen is your body breaks down. You get those little reoccurring injuries that you just can't quite get away from. And you start to not be able to bounce back quite as well. And you stop seeing the same level of progress within your training that you were seeing before. And the reason that starts happening is because you're not taking that recovery day. You're not stopping at the gas station and refueling the car. You're just driving it until the gas tank's empty and expecting it to continue to run. So when it comes to results versus hours put in, that is the first thing that I want to talk about is recovery days. Because by taking that recovery day, same thing as when you're on a road trip, stopping for gas is not taking away from the road trip. Stopping for gas is allowing the road trip to actually be able to continue. If you don't stop for gas, the car runs out of gas and it breaks down in the middle of the road, right? So when it comes to hours put in versus results that you actually get, even though you feel right now like you don't need the recovery day, so you're just going to kind of let yourself keep going, by stopping for gas, by stopping for that recovery day and giving yourself that day off, what you're doing is you're recharging your brain and you're recharging your body. And by recharging your brain and body, now when you come into your next training day, you're at a higher level than when you were coming into the last training day of the week because you've recharged. So even though maybe you didn't put in quite the same amount of hours, you're going to get more out of the hours you're putting in, right? And ultimately, that's the goal, because that's the next thing that I want to talk about within that. But just to really actually reinforce that point before we move on, when it comes to the recovery days and all of that, again, the comment that I hear most from athletes is they don't want to take recovery days because they don't feel like they need them and they feel like they're wasting time. But when it comes to recharging your body and recharging your mind and actually feeling fresher, what I want to touch on is exactly that. Those days that you go to the gym, you go train, and you feel like you just can't absorb anything that your coaches are saying to you. You feel like everything they say, they have to say 3, 4, 5 times before you actually get it through your head. Or those days where like you feel like you just can't beat that guy that you really should be able to beat. Like you're just getting touched up by guys that are not on your level. When you have 2 or 3 of those days in a row, that's a sign from your body that you're not functioning at the level that you can be. And if you're not functioning at the level you can be, then train hard all you want, you're not going to get as much out of those training sessions. So you're going to benefit more from giving yourself a day off, recharging, and coming back closer to 100% than you are by just continuing to push through that. So I hope that makes sense, but we're going to move on to the next point. Now, when it comes to getting better results instead of just putting in more hours, obviously, like we just talked about, the recovery days are super important. And then, guys, it comes down to the quality of the training. So the quality of the training, the analogy that I always like to use, and I've been guilty of this myself, both in training but also in business, is being busy versus being productive. So when it comes to being busy, a lot of people love that mentality of like, the work never stops, and they just kind of keep pushing themselves and keep pushing themselves and keep pushing themselves. But those days where, you finish up your day, you're lying in bed and you go, man, what did I even get done? And you realize that you didn't actually progress anything. You just were busy all day. You're doing the same thing with your training. You're spending 4, 5, 6 hours in the gym doing random shit because it makes you feel good to know that you were at the gym for 4 hours when you could have gotten that same result in an hour and 30 minutes. So it comes down to the quality of the work. One of the most common ones I see that I would want to touch on there is a lot of the fighters I work with, when they talk me through what they do for their training schedule. A lot of the fighters I work with talk about how after practice every day, I stay for an extra hour and I hit the bag. Okay, so let's get this straight. After an hour and a half to 2 hour practice, you're going to stay for a whole other hour and just hit the bag. What are you working on when you hit the bag? And they're like, well, like I just I pick some different combos and I drill them. I'm like, okay, good, but didn't you drill for 2 hours at practice already? Yeah, it's like, so by the time you hit the bag, how sharp do you really feel like you're being? Well, like not that sharp. And it's like, and so the idea with this, guys, is that if you're just staying to do more just for the sake of doing more, and you're not really consciously able to get a lot out of it and really be thinking about the combo and thinking about where your hands are and thinking about what you're doing, you might not just necessarily be wasting time, but you're not getting a lot out of that time. Because the goal of training, again, is to succeed in the sport. And if you're just doing a bunch of random extra shit at the end of your day to say that you're doing a bunch of random extra shit at the end of your day, it's not really helping you succeed. Because, again, one thing that I really want to make sure that I talk about with this one, when it comes to results versus hours put in, is especially in the beginning of a lot of athletes' careers, you guys are working other jobs. you guys have busy lives and you don't have the option of only training. Because everything that I'm talking about here, if you're training full time, if all you're doing is training, then this doesn't apply the same way because you have your whole day to do it. But if you're working a full-time job and you're trying to train around that, the goal has to be absolute best result in absolute minimal amount of time. Because if you're spending 4 hours a day at the gym plus a full-time job plus trying to have any kind of life whatsoever, then what starts to happen is you just start to break down, because you're going to start sacrificing sleep, you're going to start sacrificing quality nutrition, you're going to start sacrificing in all these other areas that are going to take away from your ultimate goal of succeeding in the sport. So what I want you to do when it comes to maximizing your training is ask yourself, with each individual piece of your training, with every class that you go to every week, with every extra training session you're doing on your own, with every extra hour of bag work, with every piece that you're doing during your week, ask yourself, how can I make this better? And that simple question, how can I make this better, is going to allow you to get more out of your training. Because right now, if you're hitting a bag for an hour at the end of every practice, but you start noticing that 20 minutes into that, you're kind of just checking out, then cut that down and hit a bag for 20 minutes after practice, but make sure it's intentional and make sure you're drilling a specific combination and you're improving a specific skill set. Because your ability to just throw hands at a bag for more time isn't going to translate to your ability to fight. Whereas your ability to actually drill a specific skill set and actually make conscious improvement is what's going to allow you to take a better product into the fight where it actually matters. So ask yourself, with every piece of your training, what can I do here to make this better? And then just pick out little things, right? Cutting that bag session down so you're doing a little bit less time, but you're getting more out of that time. Eliminating any sessions that you're starting to realize, I'm not actually improving anything, I'm just kind of working for the sake of working. Making sure that everything you're doing within your week has a purpose and an intention, because by making sure everything you're doing in your week has a purpose and an intention, you're going to get better results. And ultimately, the results are what matters, not the amount of hours that you're there. If someone's at the gym for 8 hours and only is really pushing themselves for 2, they can be at the gym for 2 hours and get the same amount of results. But they stick around for longer because it makes them feel like they're a harder worker. They stick around for longer because they like that little ego boost when people say, oh, wow, you're at the gym for 8 hours a day. And it's just not necessary. And it's not only is it not necessary, it's not helping you to be there for longer just to say you were there for longer. Get the result you're looking to get from the training session and then get out. And that brings me to the final point I wanted to touch on, which is the mindset around training as a whole. So many athletes get stuck in the mindset of, I need to do the most. I need to be the hardest worker. I need to do more than everyone. But what I want you to understand right now is that your work ethic isn't going to separate you. Your ability to be in the gym the most hours, to sweat more, to push yourself harder, isn't going to be what makes the difference between you and the thousands of other people that want the same goals that you want. The difference is going to be the intention. The difference is going to be optimizing the results. The difference is, while they're doing random conditioning sessions that aren't really translating over to the sport, but they're feeling good because they're working hard, you're learning how to condition yourself properly, specific for the demands of the sport that you're competing in, and you're getting better results in less time. Because now that extra time you've saved can be used for the meal prep, can be used for extra sleep, can be used to properly recover, can be used to improve in other areas of your training, extra mobility work, whatever else it is you might need. So the difference is not going to be your work ethic. The difference is going to be how good of a result you can get in the amount of time that you're putting in. And I want to really state again that me saying that the difference is not the work ethic does not mean that hard work is not important. If you are going to succeed in the sport, you absolutely need to train hard. You absolutely need to put in a lot of hours. But every athlete out there knows this. There's no athlete that truly wants to make it to the UFC or make it to a world championship level or do anything serious with their sport that doesn't understand that hard work is going to be important. So you sitting here thinking that you're just going to outwork everyone isn't how you're going to get it done. You learning how to get more out of the work that you're doing is what's going to separate you. The quality of the training is what's going to separate you. Because if you and your opponent have equal work ethic, but you've optimized your training more, so in that time, you're getting more result out of the work that you're doing, you take a better product into the fight, you win that fight. So yes, the work ethic is important. Yes, you need to put in a lot of hours. Yes, you need to work hard. You need to push yourself. All of those classic things that you hear all the time. But the thing you need to stop overlooking is the result. The thing you need to stop overlooking is the quality of the training. Don't just accept, hey, we're going to do this random bullshit conditioning session today. Look into how you can get better results from the conditioning you're doing. Breathing hard, sweating a lot, and having a high heart rate doesn't mean it was a good session. What did you do? What did you get out of it? What was the purpose? And by asking yourself those questions, you're going to continually make little tweaks that are going to continually improve the quality of the work you do. And by improving the quality of the work you do every single day, you're going to be able to get further than the other ones that are working equally as hard, but are just grinding for the sake of grinding. So guys, I appreciate you all for tuning in. I hope you got some value from that. If you did, make sure to drop a comment on the video. Make sure to drop a review for the podcast. And then share the podcast out with a friend. My big ask of you guys always, share it with a friend, share it with a teammate, share it with someone who's going to benefit from this message. And make sure that you follow along the YouTube channel, the podcast, all of my social media accounts that are all going to be linked in the show notes below. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I look forward to catching you all on the next episode.